welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and today in this game overview and gameplay video, I am going over Stonesaga, which is a game coming to Kickstarter in the very near future after this video releases. If you want to know the exact date and the link to that campaign so you can check it out for more information, I have it in the pinned comment and video description for you. Inside this video, my aim is going to be showing you all the components that came inside the prototype, and everything here is subject to change. We're also going to walk through everything I've got set up here for this entry scenario within the world of Stonesaga, and then we're also going to go through a handful of rounds of play. But before we begin, we need to talk about character creation and specifically about solo play. The two ways in which a solo player can enjoy Stonesaga is either multi-handed solo, controlling multiple characters at the same time. So in this case, and for this video, I've chosen to control two characters. I've got them here in front of you. I'll also show you the backside of each of these character boards to let you know in which alignment they fall, and also show you a couple of the characters which I didn't choose that were part of this particular prototype. Again, I could choose to control more characters beyond two if I wish. This is one option for solo players. The other is a hardcore solo mode. If you choose to take on the additional challenge of the hardcore solo mode, allowing you to play true solo, controlling only one character, there will be several key rule changes affecting that particular character and your play around character health, action costs, champion tests, and group tests in order to scale for this true solo hardcore mode. Now, for the purposes of this video, as I mentioned before, I'll be focusing on the main way to play this game solo in a cooperative fashion, playing multi-character solo. Now, just before we dive into character creation, let's quickly talk about what Stonesaga is all about. It's a cooperative campaign-style survival crafting board game, which is set in a unique and persistent world shaped by your choices. It has generational storytelling, so inside the game, you're going to unfold the epoch-spanning story of the people of a remote glacier valley, guiding multiple generations of characters who make a life there amidst the harsh conditions, wondrous mysteries, and giant monsters. Each game session you go through is going to cover one generation of people within a society, continuing from the last and permanently changing the valley in various ways based on in-game events and the player's decisions overall. The major elements of gameplay you're going to find within Stonesaga is survival, of course, a crafting and building system, exploration and discovery, and persistence throughout the game world, and that generational tie between characters past and future. The characters found inside of Stonesaga are represented by a character card and a mantle board. You're seeing the mantle boards here in front of you. These are the other two which I will not be using as part of this video, but I wanted to show them to you anyway. So there's a total of 4 inside the prototype. Now, you're not just choosing a character for its illustration on the very front of the mantle board, it also ties into its societal archetype which they occupy. And there's 4 different mantles available within this prototype. We have Mantle of the Mystic, and that mantle is connected with the secrets of the world and is more on the seer and omen side of the equation. You have the Mantle of the Seeker, which is connected with the hunt, finder of things that are hidden and obscured. You have the Mantle of the Storyteller, which is connected with your people's past, custodian of the lore, and you have Mantle of the Wanderer, and of course that's connected to exploration, the delver into places unknown. The two characters I've chosen have their societal archetype as Mantle of the Seeker and Mantle of the Wanderer. We'll begin setting up our characters by going ahead and giving them energy and health based on the number of characters in play. So currently 2 characters in play, so each of these characters will have 5 health and 5 energy. You don't need to put anything into the top row where you can see hearts and hearts with icons of individuals, but down below at the very bottom, the lightning bolts represent energy. We're going to fill those up with 5 energy tokens. With the energy now in place, we're going to take a character card for each of the characters I'm controlling. We're going to slot it underneath the game board, and you'll see that for each of the abilities, they're dictated right on the character card. We have Might on the far left, then Dexterity, then Conviction, and then Awareness. Next, across the abilities we just talked about, we're going to go ahead and grab 5 dice. Even though there's only 4 abilities, we're going to roll these dice, and we're going to choose the 4 we want to populate each of the different abilities in terms of where those levels begin. You're going to typically want to take higher values off these rolls, so we'll go ahead right now and do the first character's roll here and determine that. So we have some really good rolls right off the hop here. We have a 6, a 5, a 6, and I will probably take the 3 and leave the 2. Now, it's worth mentioning before you go ahead and assign your abilities, which I've already gone ahead and done, if you happen to have rolled and the sum of all 5 of your dice is 13 or lower, you may re-roll all of your dice. Next, we're going to choose a trait for our character, place it on the character card. It has no intrinsic effects, but it's going to give us particular bonuses when we have that certain trait as called by from the game as we play through it. The options I have here in the prototype are cunning, intrepid, indomitable, resourceful, and wise. I'm going to choose to go with resourceful. You'll also name your characters, and for all active characters, they can either be young or old. Characters who have passed into the society's stories through old age or other more dramatic means of becoming deceased are considered legends, so you cannot have a legend off the bat here. I've also gone ahead and built up my character. On the opposite side here, we have Whisper, who has a trait of Wise with 4, 4, 6, and 1 across the abilities. With our characters now set up, we're going to go around the game board. I'm going to talk about all the different components that are laid out so you have an idea as to what they all are at a high level. Then we're going to talk about the challenge that we're diving into and get into some rounds of play. We'll start on the left-hand side of the game board with the decks. We have the Discovery deck right here. This deck contains things the characters might find while exploring the valley, whether it's good or bad. You have the Night deck, and that is going to contain dangers the characters might find within the veil of each night. It also generates the omens for each round of play. You'll see how those work later on. The setup instructions also tell us to take out from the Night deck a number of cards, NB01 through NB05, and place them off to the side. So I've taken them out of the Night deck. These decks are also shuffled. Above this, we have the Outpost deck. When an outpost is created, you're going to use this deck of cards, which is going to come in with a bunch of blank fields like name, category, status, structures, the epoch it was built in, and the ID. You'll be filling these out in order to keep a reference of the outpost created. This next deck, which is quite large in comparison to all the other decks, is the crafting deck, containing all the items that can be created by combining materials inside of Stonesaga. Again, this is just prototype only, and when you combine 2 materials, you read the code and refer to the relevant crafting table to determine what you've created. So each item card has its material codes on the back, and you're going to be tying these together to determine which card from this deck you're pulling out. The next deck is the Delving deck in the top right hand corner, and it's a deck of cards which is used for delving into caves and chasms. Both the front and backs of the cards are unique and are used for this activity. We'll see more about this later on. We're now going to get into foraging, and there's actually 2 different foraging locations based on their terrain type inside this prototype. So when you take the foraging activity, you're going to go ahead and do it dependent on which terrain type you're in, whether it be forest or plains. Finally, we have a deck of cards which you use specifically for fishing at rivers, lakes, and wetlands. Also included inside the prototype was handy reference cards for each of these different activities or decks of cards, letting you know exactly how they operate, what they do, and also the cost of doing them. In the top left-hand corner, we have what's known as behemoths in the world of Stonesaga. These are going to be larger scale miniatures. These are new arrivals in the glacier valley that your society calls home. You're going to have to deal with these things. They're going to come in with their own tiles, which are considered their layer tiles, and they will be like an overlay tile that you place into the map of the game world, and that is where the behemoth resides. Also, the behemoths can move around as well. They have differences in terms of how they operate, an AI that works for how they operate, and you'll also get decks of cards specific to each of them, as well as boards, which you can see set up in a row type fashion for this particular scenario or challenge. So in this case here, we have 1 and 2 set up top to bottom. And as you can see, we have specific decks for each of these behemoths: instinct deck, reaction deck, and a secret deck. We'll talk more about behemoths later on towards the end of the video. Next, we have the dials. There are 2 of them. The one on the left is the activity dial, which reflects the level of disturbance that the group has created within the valley. And it's important to note that activity is not persistent between games. Now, the unrest dial on the other side of the coin reflects the societal strife that is built up based on the character's decisions and actions over the generations, and unrest is persistent between games. And it's worth mentioning that the dials are set to 0 for the setup of this prototype play. Now we move on to the challenge and goal cards. So we have the challenge card in the center called Seeds on the Wind. And what's important to focus on within the card is on the bottom left-hand corner and bottom right-hand corner is a number of cards to find, which are goal cards. And they're either a vital goal or they are a set-aside goal. The vital goals go on the left-hand left-hand side of the challenge card, so we have through walls of ice, which is our vital goal, and on the right-hand side we have the set aside goals, which are a number of them in this case. We put the very first one on the list at the very bottom, and then we start placing the others underneath. Sometimes it's quite fun to actually hide these. You don't know exactly what they are as you're continuing to move through them if you want to keep them a secret, which I believe is the best way to play. So I've got myself all set up here. We'll revisit this later on and actually read all these cards to get a narrative idea as to what's going on and also our objectives. There are only two terrain types inside the prototype. One is called the Verdant Vale and the other is called Skyreach Plateau. You can see them there. You'll also see a tile which says starting. We're going to go back to these later on as we begin to fill out the game board to begin our journey. You'll also see these tile trays. You'll want to have them in a pile nearby. You'll be using them as you explore throughout the game world. These components relate to mining inside the game, including the drawstring bag. At the very top row, we have clay, then we have riverstone, sunstone, and cloudstone. You'll notice on the opposite side of these mining components, there are the omens printed, and there are only 5 unique omens in the game. For each of the different types of mining tokens here, row by row, you have all 5 omens present across all of their tokens. In regards to the setup, you're going to make sure that the omen side is face down, shuffle them all around so you have no idea which omen is where, and we'll be using these during mining later on. We now take a look at the right-hand side of the game board where a number of tokens have been organized. We have some white tokens up there at the very top. We have shelter and fire, for example. Right underneath of that, we have what are known as rare tokens. They represent unusual materials. And this is where we get into a whole bunch of material tokens. So all those square tokens that you're seeing, ones in brown are animal-based tokens. So things that represent body parts of animals like bone, hide, tendon, feather, tooth, and shell. Then we get into the minerals, which again relate back to mining, like sunstone, riverstone, cloudstone, and clay. The vegetables are in green. We have wood, fiber, and pitch, for example. You'll also notice another deck over there, and that's another crafting deck. It's for crafting structures, and this contains all the structures that can be built at outposts inside of Stonesaga. And we have a number of mantle tiles as well. These tiles will eventually be gained by you, and when you gain one, you're able to place it on your character board, or actually better known as your mantle board for your character. There is a mantle slot in the bottom right-hand corner, currently on both of my character boards, which is empty at the beginning of play, but after we get through our very first challenge and continue onwards, there will be times where we draw from this, and again, tying into the societal archetype of the character that we've chosen. If you remember from the beginning of the video, when I flipped over the character board, we had a societal archetype named on the back of each of them. That's going to again tie back into these mantle tiles. Now let's talk about a number of other tokens inside of Stonesaga, and I place these inside of game trays. The game trays themselves do not come as part of the prototype. In the top right-hand corner here, we have energy tokens you've seen before. They're on the mantle boards right now. Other circular tokens which will land on your mantle board, which you probably don't want to see, is major and minor injuries and major and minor diseases. You'll know the difference between them, well, simply because of the icon itself. In terms of what's major versus minor, the color variation will tell you on either side. Plus, you'll also note that the minor version has a smaller icon in this case and a larger one in this case, or a more aggressive icon illustration in terms of the injury, where the actual bone icon's more broken on the major one and a little less broken and fractured on the minor injury. So that's how you differentiate between them quite easily. You have the boost tokens, lore tokens, water tokens, and then you get into food. So you have fish, mushroom, meat, and you have root. And these are going to come in as fresh on their orange side. They're eventually going to go to fermented on the green side. We'll talk more about that later on. And then of course they rot because, well, they're perishable food, so they're not going to last forever. But you also have what's known as tough food, like grain and nut. And on the brown side of each of these tokens, where you have grain and nut, you're going to see actual nut represented on them on that brown side to let you know that they are protected from rot, but you still need to process them for them to be nutritious. So when you process them, they flip to their yellow side and then you can eat them. So now that you have a better understanding of the components laid out on the game table, let's quickly talk about the health track on your character, because it's pretty important. Each mantle has a character's health track, which represents their vitality. And when a character suffers an injury or disease, as denoted by the tokens I just showed you moments ago, you're going to place it in an unfilled slot on the health track. And if a character's health track is ever filled based on the maximum health, and in my case right now with 2 characters, I can go all the way up to the 5th position based on the 2 character icon in the heart. Again, if I was playing with 3 characters, have a little less, and so on and so forth. The rulebook will depict exactly how much health and energy you have. But in my case, I'm using full usage of health and energy for both of my characters. But if I fill up my health track, then I'm going to become incapacitated. And if I'm incapacitated, I can't take any actions, but I can be revived by a friendly character. And at the start of each night phase, each incapacitated character perishes though. So there's a limited window in order to try to bring that person back. If you can't do it in time, that character does die. The final thing around character death, which I want to make you aware of before we dive into some gameplay, is the fact that death within the game in terms of the characters has ripple effects that have impacts going into the future. So that generational tie-in is always there. Whether your character dies from old age, whether they die from an actual illness, or from an injury, or for some blend of the two, that individual will then become legend. And we're going to talk about how that impacts the gameplay going forward later on in the video. Another item which I have just off camera is the codex, and this actually has numerous entries which are organized into tables in the book, and these entries are secret information, so I'm not going to show you any of this unless of course the game actually pulls us into it, but there will be a full codex for the final version of the game, and there's one here for the prototype as well. Now let's dive into some gameplay for Stonesaga. We're going to start here at Crisis Priority 1. This is the first challenge within the prototype called Seeds on the Wind. The narrative text here says, under watch of the distant and icy moon, your people found a passage into a primordial veil long sealed behind ancient frosts. To survive, you will need to find sustenance and a refuge for your people for the harsh winter to come. Now, based on the challenge card mentioning the vital card in the bottom left-hand corner, we have through walls of ice. The narrative text on this one states, as you enter the valley, you must study your surroundings in this strange new place to establish that your people can make a life here. It says we have to complete the following actions in order. We have to gather water at a river, fish at a river, forage at a forest or plains, mine at a chasm, and create a shelter at a cave. And this goal is completed when all the above actions have been completed. For this challenge within the prototype, we have the Verdant Vale on the right-hand side and the Skyreach Plateau on the left. And we get to choose which terrain type we're currently starting in. So you're going to grab a starting tile for each of them, select which one you want to begin in, and then place it in the terrain tray. With our terrain type now selected and one tile revealed, we are going to bring in 2 unexplored terrain tiles of the same type and also grab the miniatures for both our characters and place them on the starting tile. The tile stack that you pull from will be face down and shuffled, so you have absolutely no idea what tiles are going to be in those locations until you move to them and explore them in the future. Now, something you're going to notice about Stonesaga as you play through the game is that the illustrations aren't just great to look at, but also serve an in-game purpose in terms of what you can actually interact with on a given tile or even on given cards within the game as well. I'll show you how all that works as we go along, but here on this starting tile out in this area, which is looking quite desolate, we do have a plains area over here, and we also have a cave in the bottom right. You'll also notice a river flowing along the top right of the tile as well. So we move into the day phase, which is one of the major phases of the game. We're going to be doing a lot of actions and activities within the game world. Of course, we know our challenge. We also have our vital goal, and we're going to go through that vital goal in order, starting with the very first thing, which is gathering water at a river. The key thing to remember during the day phase is that you can have any character activate in whichever order you'd like. So I could choose to have this character go ahead and expend energy in order to do an activity like gathering water, or I could have this character on the right-hand side begin, and I can bounce back and forth between the characters, or have one character expend all their energy all at once, then jump to the other one. You can also stop when you feel like stopping in terms of how much energy you want to expend. In this case, we're going to go ahead and have this individual over here, Whisper, is going to expend 1 energy to gather water at the river. So Whisper spent an energy and was able to acquire 2 water from the river. I placed both those tokens inside the inventory bag for this character. It's worth mentioning later on the round, there will be a point in time where we need to double check the inventory bag to ensure that all tokens that we've gathered from all the different items and different resources we can potentially get can actually fit inside of this recessed area on the mantle board. So that's going to be another aspect you'll have to manage as well. And it's worth mentioning there's also the option to share. So before you take an action or after you take an action, you can designate a character that's going to receive some benefits as well. So for instance, here we spent an energy with Whisper. We got 2 water. I can place it there if I wish, but I can also split it up across my 2 characters. And for now, this works for me. And this completes the very first of 5 different steps that we need to complete on the goal card for the vital goal. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to fish at the river. So as we're about to take a fishing action, we'll take a look at the fishing reference card, which is going to highlight on one side the different type of illustrations you need to have on a particular hex in order to do that activity, plus the cost at the bottom. So we are at a river, as it says at the very bottom, so this is a valid place to fish. It's going to cost us 2 energy to do so. I'm going to decide that this character will be the one fishing, so I've removed 2 energy. I've also grabbed the fishing deck, which we're going to use right now as we attempt to find something. The first thing we're going to do is draw a card off the top of the fishing deck, which I've done, flip it over, and these are going to be our targets. We then go ahead and draw another fish card, which we're going to place face down, horizontal, and connected to the targets, so we have things laid out like this. With our targets set and the water we're going to be fishing in, we're going to grab 4 dice from the pool, we're going to roll them, and we're going to be placing them inside the water card itself in order to help us be successful at that particular fishing spot. So let's go ahead and roll these dice, see how we do. We got some decently high rolls here and one quite low one. So in this situation, I'm really gunning for water and fish. So why have I placed my dice the way I have? Well, because when I'm looking at the lines, which are connected to each of the targets, you can see this one is a row here, this is a row, and this is a row. We have 5, 3, and 4. If I hit the 5 target in terms of the numerical value or higher, I'm going to get water times 2, which is a nice modifier there, on the white line. If I follow the white line all the way through and I remove these 2 dice, the 2 dice sit on top of the white line and the red line, which means by placing these 2 dice here, I'm actually making an impact on both of these. In other words, I'm able to be kind of pushing my luck in a way that is going to likely result in a successful fish because I'm above the target value I'm trying to hit. I've got 6 in here right now. I need 5 on the white line, which I certainly have right now, and 4 on the red line, which I certainly have with that positioning like I've done. Now over here with the fish, they're on the black line. I've put 2 here and I've gone a little bit crazy and I've put both of them in there, which is going to be 8, and my target is 3. So I'm really looking pretty good for this fishing result. But there is one other thing that comes into play that can change things. And that's the modifier card. And this card's going to come in just like the other ones did. And you can see all these cards come from the same fishing deck. The deck is just used in 3 different ways to create the entire fishing experience, which is very cool. But this final card that comes in focuses on the modifiers side, which you can see is just simply rotating it around from the target side. And it's going to go ahead and add to the value up in the opposite side for the targets. In other words, make things a little bit tougher for you all of a sudden. So what you thought might have been a safe bet might change for you. So the first thing you do is take a look at the lines that you've actually placed dice on, and you're going to resolve those one at a time. The very first line to look at is the white line at the very top here. So if we trail through it, we've got a 6 right here, but the target is 5 plus whatever's at the end of this trail, which happens to be a 6. So that means we have a tied result. Now these values that I placed on the fishing card are considered strike values, and when your strike value totals the same or beyond the target value you're going after, and of course that includes modifiers, then you succeed. So in this case, a tie is a success for me, and that's a really good thing. And the reason it is because there was also a keyword inside of here that said mishap. So if we had happened to have failed that particular fish on that white line, then we would come down here and it says suffer 1 minor injury. In other words, a mishap happens while we were fishing, and I just missed that happening, which is good for me. So far we've gained 2 water. Normally you would gain 1 in most cases, but this one has a ×2 modifier, so that gives us 2 in total. And we're going to go to the black line now, and that is a total of 8 right here. We're looking for a fish. And if we go all the way up, the black line goes up to this top section here, which would make it a 6 for the target, and our strike dice is 8. So we succeed on this as well and also get a fish. And when you gain any type of food which can potentially spoil, just make sure that it's not on the fermented side to start, it's on its fresh side. So that resolves that one, and we also have dice on the red line as well, so we take a look at that. We have a water icon, and we also have a resource to potentially gain from this. Target is 4, the red line goes all the way up and through here, and if we move these 2 dice, you'll see It sits right on top of that red line. So we have 6, but if we go all the way to the end, we got really lucky. This ends up being a 6 as well, so we succeed at all 3 of them. So we've gathered all of our resources from our successful fishing trip, a very successful one. It's worth mentioning my prior fishing trips will result sometimes in just 1 resource gain in total, or maybe just 2. This is a really good example of things going well, but it won't always pan out like that for you. Also, there's the ability to potentially reroll dice in this, plus there's the ability that you could roll the die off the hop, not have any rerolls to be able to modify things, and be stuck with what you have, which would of course limit the kind of things you can pull off in one fishing activity. So it won't always be this good. Ryu is feeling pretty good about everything fished up from the river, and one thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share some of that water with another character in my hex, so that character has something as well. I'm going to bring 2 water over. The resources have been shared, and it's also kind of ironic that we gave the character trait resourceful up top here, seeing as that seems to be exactly what Ryu is all about so far. So fishing is a great way to gain resources, but does lead to potential risk around injury or potential fatigue and losing more energy tokens. And again, it all really hinges on what type of body of water you're fishing out of in terms of the mishap. You'll also see here on the reference card, there's bonuses. You can actually get even more additional bonuses out of fishing as well if the particular modifier card allows for it. And now that we're finished our fishing activity, I flipped over the reference card so you can actually see the full breakdown of the fishing process, which I just explained. But again, you have this while you're playing the game outside of the rulebook. So under the 5 things we need to complete on this vital card, we've completed the first 2. We're now going to do a foraging at a forest or a plains. In this case, it'll be a plains. So as you can see on the hex we're currently in, we have a plains location allowing us to do some foraging and is going to cost 2 energy. I'm going to have Whisper pay this one. I've gone ahead and paid the 2 energy off of Whisper's mantle board. We have 2 left, and then over here for Ryu we have 3. And now we're going to go into some foraging. We're going to grab 2 cards off the top of the plains deck. The foraging action is a great example of how illustrations within the game become an active part of the experience, and what you're actually doing as an action, you visually have to look at the cards yourself to determine what you're going after and if there's any predators or threats inside of them. So drawing 2 cards off the top of the deck, we have a choice to make. We get to pick which of these 2 cards we want to have. Now there's pros and cons to picking either one, and I'll try to explain them in a summarized way here. This card is broken into 3 rows. So you'll see at the very beginning here, we have a green area right up close, so something we can easily obtain just by reaching out and grabbing it. We have this brown area here in the center, which is about a medium distance away, and then further off in the distance, we have kind of a plains area. So the card is divided up into those 3 different sections of distance alone. So something else to notice on the card is we definitely have a predator in both of them. One is further away than the other one is. So right off the hop here, knowing that my characters are maybe not ready to take on a predator just yet, I may not want to grab this card here as the predator is already making its way closer to me. When the predator eventually reaches the row that is closest to us on the green, it's going to essentially attack us in that moment. And it's for that reason that I'll likely be choosing the one on the right-hand side to keep the predator further away from me so we don't have to resolve it as fast. And I don't like the idea that I could potentially pull a card here and have the predator right up on top of me and have to either do a fight or flight situation. So there are other things going on in the cards, and I want to go over the ones you're seeing here. So of course on these cards we have the predator, as I've already talked about. We also have a smaller creature there known as prey. They're small, and this one is at medium distance away, so it's basically 2 spaces away. Now the thing is, how it works in terms of connecting to something you might see in the distance that you really want to go after. So for instance, I might really want to take down some small prey. Maybe I'll be able to get something from that creature when I kill it in order to then craft something I'm really going after. But you can't just jump to that distance away right away. You have to connect to it. And we'll talk more about this as more of these cards come off the deck, because it has a push your luck element to try to get as much during the forage activity or action as you possibly can. Your cap, unless you have an in-game effect that allows more, is 3 of one similar thing. So for instance, if we were really gunning for root plants, then we could go after the root plants that are sitting right in front of us. But again, once you draw 2 cards, you have to choose which of the 2 you want to go after, and because again, I don't want to deal with the predator right away, I'm keeping the one on the right. We're going to draw 2 more cards, and we'll see how things begin to tie in, and I'll talk about how you can chain things together in terms of distance to acquire more resources. So I've drawn the next 2 cards from the foraging deck as we continue to forage for more, and you'll notice the first thing you need to keep an eye on, especially when you have a predator already in your tableau are the cards you've chosen to keep, is that for the cards you've just drawn, if you happen to have a predator on those cards, then you need to bring that card with a predator into your tableau. And it has to be either in the same row or a row that's closer to you. In other words, the predator is going to be slowly creeping up on you unless you get lucky like I just did and it's staying in the background. So for instance, if I happen to have a predator that was in the back here on the plains and the next predator over here was actually midway, I would be able to choose between the 2 as they're both legal. I could choose to keep the predator in the back, or I could have him move forward. The reason you may want to do this depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to have a prey encounter with this big beast? Or maybe you're trying to go after specific resources that are maybe tied between this first location and this second location. Like it's a perfect example right here with this particular item, which is a root plant, and this one here. So in this case, because he's further away, I don't really care. I'm going to go ahead and choose this one. And that's going to allow me right now, because the same resource is tied between these 2 locations, I'm going to be able to go over and gather both of them if I choose to stop right now, or I could try to continue foraging and push my luck some more. So across these foraging cards, as you continue to push your luck, adding out to your tableau, you're going to find things like animal paths, which are going to allow you access to other objects you can forage. You're going to have streams you can gather water. You're going to have grain bushes. You're going to have prey that's small and large, big predators as we've seen, nut bushes, root plants, trees. All these types of things are resources you can forage at this time. Now, another thing you can find while you're foraging is bonus objects. You might be wondering what those are. Again, digging into the illustrations beyond just surface level will gain you some additional items if you're paying attention. So, if we take a look at the 2 foraging cards I have right here, if I want to forage at this particular point and don't want to keep pushing my luck on this and any kind of risk that something will happen to me, although again, the predator's really far away, so I could likely do this quite safely. But remember, the cap of how much of one resource I can take at the same time is 3. So I think I'm in a really good spot here to stop. So the reason I'm thinking of stopping is, first off, you'll see trees. So they got a tree that's sitting right here in the very first row, right up close. Now, you might think that's all you get is that tree foraging resource, but if you also in your tableau have another of that exact same resource in the following row, so this row right here in the middle, then you gain that one as well when you're foraging it for trees. So I would actually get this tree, that tree, and then this tree way back here as well. So that would be really good. But on top of that, those are the objects you're foraging. But if you look at the illustrations closely, there's a couple things that you might get as a bonus item on each of these different trees. Maybe not all of them, but 2 of them at least. From this tree right here, you would gain pitch, and from this tree over here, you would gain feathers. So if you're keeping your eyes open, you also obtain these at the same time as you choose to forage from a tree. The idea here is if you're choosing, you've gotten close enough visually to go after the tree that's right here, you're also going to go ahead and grab all the other objects throughout the rows. And so that also works for other items like this one here. You've got this root plant that's sitting really up close. If I wanted to take that root plant, I could take it and also take the 2 root plants behind it instead. So this is a really good pairing that I have here. I could go either way, but honestly, the tree situation is pretty good. So when you decide to stop pushing your luck with foraging and you choose an object within reach, meaning it has to be close up to you in that first row, then you start gathering all the resources that tie in. I've got a whole bunch of them here thanks to going after the tree. So a great day of foraging. We got ourselves 1 wood, which I placed here for Whisper. I put 2 with Ryu, because again, we can share the results of this being that we're on the same hex. And also placed the pitch and the feather over here with Whisper. Whisper was the one that actually made the foraging action, but again, sharing resources between the different characters is a good thing. Now, just so you can understand what a prey encounter can trigger, it literally could trigger right when you do your very first foraging activity. So if I decided to forage again, I pulled 2 more cards starting fresh, and this is the result I got. If I ever have a predator in the very nearest section to me, I immediately go into a prey encounter. So here in the prototype rules, in a situation like I just showed you as an example where the predator's on the very first row, you are going to have to make a choice. You're either going to be fighting this thing or trying to flee it. And you need to make a check in order to fight it or flee from it using your abilities to help you out and any boosts you might have for the check. Now, as you also likely noticed moments ago, there's also animal encounters. We talked about small prey and large prey. You're going to need to, at times, find animal tracks in order to get close enough to be able to have one of these animal encounters to try and hunt down one of these types of prey to, again, try to gather resources from them by successfully taking them down. These are all part of the foraging activity, but it's really open-ended, and you really can go after the resources that you're trying to go for by pushing your luck further and further at the risk of having a predator jump in your way. So as an example, you'll see animal tracks on this card right here as I've set this up, and also you'll see different types of foraging decks dependent on the type of terrain you're on for the hex that you're currently on with your character. So you'll also see objects that you might not see on the plains in the forest, for example. We've now completed 3 of the steps of Through Walls of Ice, the vital goal. We need to go for step number 4, and that is mining at a chasm. And on this location, based on this hex, we have a chasm right there at the very bottom of the card. So we'll go ahead and spend 2 energy off of Ryu to do this. Like other activities, there's a reference card for this one as well. For mining, it's going to show you the steps involved, also different types of resources we could acquire, and where we can do this. Things get interesting with mining because it depends on where you're doing that mining. So if we're doing it in a cave, we're going to be placing specific components inside of a draw bag. And again, we're not going to be looking at the omens on the underside of them. We're just grabbing them with them all face down. We need to grab exactly how many are stated. So we're not in a cave. We're actually looking for the chasm one. So we'll be grabbing those resources, place them inside the bag, but we'll have an idea as to which types of resources are going in the bag. The idea here is that we then put our hand in the bag and we feel around the different types of resources, which all have a oval-like nature to them, but there is a little bit of difference, enough to hopefully distinguish them so that you can go after the one you're trying to get. And then of course, when you gain that resource by pulling it out of the bag, you'll also flip it over and check the omen. So here's all the resources face down. We need 2 sunstones, 1 cloud stone, and finally 2 river stones going in the bag. So then we take all these resources, we place them inside the drawstring bag, and again we put our hand inside, feel around, and draw one out. And I'm going to be aiming to try to get the cloud stone. So I was able to pull out the exact one that I was looking for, and now we're going to flip this over to see what omen's on the opposite side. That is the omen, and it doesn't match the current omen in play. The omen for the game is going to continue to change based on the night deck. However, we haven't gotten to the night phase yet. So instead, we reference the challenge card. In the top right-hand corner, you'll see the omen symbol up there. It absolutely does not match. We now take a look at the mining reference card, and based on the omen on the back of the token we pulled out of the bag, which is a star, it tells us we're going to suffer 1 minor injury. Now, if the match had have actually happened between the token we pulled out of the bag and the current omen, then we would gain the match effect. I don't get that in this case, I just get hurt. So I've taken my minor injury. You'll see on the opposite side, it can actually be a major injury as well. In this case, it's just minor, taking up one of the slots still, either way, on my board for health. Also gain a resource depicted by what I gathered from mining. And I can choose while doing this mining activity to actually pull again if I want to. I did pull another one, and I got myself this token right here, and this is going to provide me with this symbol. And if I take a look here, it says suffer 1 minor illness. So I'm also going to be getting sick on top of it, but gaining an additional resource. And that's going to do it for this mining activity. Got myself some resources, got a little bit sick and a little bit hurt doing it. Next, we're going to go ahead and spend an energy here from Ryu. We're going to build a shelter inside of the cave here. And this is going to exist at this location until the end of the challenge. Now, shelters are one thing to build, but you can also build, which I won't be doing right now, but I'll explain it quickly, is outposts. And you can build an outpost by spending 4 energy to place an outpost on your hex. And these tiles, you can pick the one that depicts the best for the location that you're currently in. So in this case, we'd probably use one of these. And you can rotate it in any way you want in order to place it on the hex, and that's where the outpost will stay. And outposts begin to tie into some of the items that you're trying to craft within the game, because if you're going to build an outpost, it needs to be placed in a place that is open area for free, because, well, it's just easy to place there like this. But if I am going ahead and placing it over top of some cave or a chasm, then I'm going to need to have a specific type of item to be able to pull that off. And you'll see examples of the iconography depending on what you're trying to cover with your outposts down below on the reference card. It's also worth mentioning outposts can also become ruins as well and be taken out of play. At this point, we finished our very first day phase. We're moving into the night phase. The reference card again lays out everything that we need to do. I'm going to walk you through the entirety of the night phase and everything that ties into it. If you have any effects that would trigger at the start of the night phase, they occur right now. But for the moment, we're skipping past this. We're going to jump right into resting. Now, when playing with two characters, you're automatically going to recuperate 2 energy each. So Ryu goes from 0 to 2. Whisper has 2 remaining from the end of the day phase, plus the 2 that are going back right now, so 4. At this point, if we want to bump up our energy levels, we can consume water or food. So over here for Whisper, I'll consume 1 water to get us up to 5 energy. Over here, we need 3 more to be full, so I'm going to go ahead and consume the fish and both of the waters. It's also worth mentioning there is nothing saying that you have to get your energy levels back up to completely full based on the number of characters that you're playing. So in this case, 5. I could have chosen to stop with Whisper at 4, but there is a benefit to getting back to full energy. For each character that replenishes back up to their maximum energy, they're going to gain a minor boost, and that's going to come in the form of a token. On the minor boost side, it is a 1. If I flip that token over, it's a 2. You only get a minor boost off of this, so we're going to go ahead and place that token in here. I'm doing it on the weakest ability for Whisper, which is currently Awareness, which is going to go from a 1 to a 2. And over here with Ryu, that is Conviction, which is going from a 3 to a 4. One thing that I missed mentioning prior to going ahead and getting the minor boost after getting my energy all the way up is that the shelter also provides an energy back for each of my characters as well. So in order to resolve that, I'm simply going to bring back a water for each of them. Now we get to check for a really cool benefit for eating food and water together. When we do this during the night phase, we get to degrade a disease or an injury. We get to choose. When you degrade something, you take it from its major side and make it minor, or you take it from its minor side and you discard it. So prior to the night phase going in, we had 2 water and a fish. I did consume a water and a fish. That combination allows me to choose whether I want to get rid of the minor injury or the minor disease. And I got rid of the minor disease in this case, which is a nice benefit. The final thing we get to check for is whether we drank any water. Well, we know already that Ryu definitely drank water, so we're okay there. If we didn't drink water, then we suffer a minor injury. So because we know we need to drink water, what I'm going to choose to do, because I went into the night phase with Whisper with 3 water and I currently haven't drank any, I also went into this phase with 2 energy, so I didn't have all 5. And because I'm playing with 2 characters, it automatically brings back 2. So instead of taking advantage of the shelter as I talked about moments ago and retroactively changed, I'm actually going to go ahead and spend the water to make sure that I get the water usage to bring back the energy, and that will avoid me taking a minor injury. Now let's quickly talk about degrading food. Pretty easy. If you happen to have any food that does degrade, and you'll know it because it'll be orange on the front-facing fresh side, like a fish for instance, but I've already gone ahead and consumed my fish for Ryu, so not an issue. But let's say I didn't consume it and it was sitting here. At this point, I would flip this over, it'd be fermenting. It would last another round, and then when this came back around again, if I didn't consume it again, then it would go bad and be discarded. There is a number of different types of food that follow this type of pattern. Now, if there happens to be a fire token on the hex we're on, we're going to remove each of the fire tokens from the hex. A character can spend a wood material from their inventory to prevent a fire token from being removed from the hex. So basically just prolonging it. As you saw, I did some foraging and got a bunch of wood. So if we were to create a fire, which is represented as a white flame token in this prototype, we could keep it alive right now by discarding a piece of wood. Next, you take any night actions you may have, and it's worth mentioning by default you won't have any. If you ever happen to see kind of a few Z's in a row as an icon, that's how you know that it is a night action. These are typically generated and granted by item cards, and each night action can be taken only once by each character. And again, night actions can be taken in any order, very similar to how characters take their turns. It's at this point in the night phase, as we're getting close to the end of it, that we go ahead and take a look at our inventory bags. If any of the tokens do not fit within the inventory recessed area, those tokens, by your choosing, are discarded. You'll have to make tough choices. So you'll see, you'll be able to, during the day phase, pile up a number of tokens in these slots. They can overlap, no big deal. But when you get to this step of the night phase, this is when you need to make sure that everything fits in your inventory bag for the next day. You might also be lucky enough to have crafted an item card which will allow you to place other things inside of it, but but until you get something like that, you're constrained to your inventory bags. The final thing we do in the night phase is draw a night card. For each hex that has one or more characters in it, we choose one character to draw a night card. So in this case, both our characters happen to be in the exact same hex, so one night card will be drawn regardless. We're pulling this off the top right now. The night phase card for us is a nasty one. This one says weather and group. When it states group, that keyword lets us know that everybody on the hex is going to have to do this check. So that's unfortunate for both of my characters. You'll also see ones that will say solo, so that will mean the individual that happened to have pulled that card will resolve it only. And then there's champion, and if you see champion at the top, the character whose player drew it must choose one character in their hex to resolve the effect. So you can maybe choose somebody that might be a little bit better for that particular check. In this case, both characters are going to have to go through this. We have a deadly chill, so you wake up shivering as the temperature is dropping. Everyone in your hex must go ahead and test. We're going to be doing that right now. I'm going to grab some dice and see how this goes. So this is one of the many tests within the game. It's going to tell you exactly what ability you're going to be banking off of. Currently, that's going to be Might. For Whisper, Whisper has 4 right now, but I get a +1 if I have, for each of the following: clothing item, shelter, and fire. So if I had all 3, I get a +3. I only have shelter, so I just get +1. So I have 4, +1, I've got 5. I'm rolling 1d6. You always do that with tests. So unfortunately, the best I can get is an 11, which means, looking at the different results, there's no way I can actually get up to that top result, which is the happy result where nothing bad happens. So I'm probably falling into the lower 2. Actually, I am for sure. I just don't know which one it'll be. But I really hope I don't roll something poor here. I've got 5. So basically, I need a 3 or higher to get up into the better tier. I got a 2, so that did not work out. I ended up with a 7, so that's going to have me suffering a major disease. Poor Whisper. All right, so the major disease has been placed in. Let's go ahead and roll the die now for Ryu. Again, this is a group thing, so everybody's got to roll for this. And Ryu this time has 6 going in, +1 for the shelter, so 7. So actually possible to get a good result here if I get a good enough die roll. So we're looking for 5. That's what we want, 5 or higher. And we did not get it at all. We got an 8, which does put us into the middle one though, so thank goodness for that. We just lose an energy and suffer 1 minor disease. So the minor disease we got rid of just came right back overnight. So here's how my characters are currently shaping up. We're taking a little bit of a beating here on the health track and some energy depletion as well. That's going to wrap up the night phase in terms of all the different steps, but the one thing you need to look at as well is also the bottom of the night card. It will tell you how to uptick the activity dial, and by how much. We start at 0, it is now going to go up by 1, and that is going to start ticking towards the next trigger, which is on the back of the challenge card. I'll show you the back of the challenge card in a second, where once you get to certain activity thresholds in the land, something's going to happen. Also, you'll notice there's an omen in the bottom right-hand corner, so the omen that's on the challenge card no longer applies, although in this case, it happens to be the exact same omen anyway, but as we go through each of the night cards at the end of each round, the omen's going to constantly keep changing. So I've gone ahead and taken the challenge card, flipped it over to the opposite side. Again, this is the major card that lines up the scenario you're playing. On the back side will show you when you get to activity level 4, 8, 12, and 20, you're going to have different things that are going to occur, whether it be an event or a societal event. There'll be different things that are going to impact the gameplay. The dial has also been set to 1 as a reference, and we can move on. So taking a look at our vital goal card, we know we went through all of these steps in the very first day. The second that this is completed, then this gets flipped over. In this case, I'm doing it a little bit later, but doesn't have any impact whatsoever because it simply just tells us some narrative here. While many plants and animals of the valley are strange to you, you have found the basics of survival on your first day. Now, night descends. We resolve the first night phase, which we've already gone ahead and done, and then put the vital goal, explore your surroundings, into play. Explore your surroundings is to the right of your challenge card, and it is one of the set aside goals. This one tells us to explore our surroundings. As you enter the Vale, you must take stock of your surroundings in this strange new place. You can use the explore action to move into and explore an adjacent unexplored hex by spending 2 energy, then resolve a card from the discovery deck. This goal is completed after a 3rd hex is explored. So this concept is very simple. We've done everything on an explored hex as of the first day, but we're going to start moving into unexplored hex. And when we want to move into an unexplored hex, we're going to pay 2 energy in order to move into it and of course make it explored. I'm going to go ahead and have Whisper spend 2 to move in. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take a look at the rulebook and reference cards, take a look at the illustration of the hex you've just gone ahead and explored to see what types of things are there. This is again going to dictate what type of actions and activities you can take here. But at this point, the second we move into this tile, we're going to pull a discovery card. We got a hazard called disorientation. It says choose one and resolve it. Despite your claims to the contrary, you are quite lost. We can go ahead and test our awareness to find the way. We get to add +2 if we have a map. We do not have a map yet, but that sounds really helpful. So in this case, we can do that, or we can try to test our conviction to stubbornly continue, and we get a +2 if you are intrepid. Now, intrepid is a trait. That's a trait that I currently don't have. So I don't have a benefit on either side of this equation, so it really comes down to which way I want to go. And in this case, which way I want to go really does come down to what type of stat that I have. Right now, I do have a boost in here for my awareness, but it's just 2, which is pretty bad. Whereas if I go with my conviction, it's much, much higher. It's already at 6. I don't have the boost, but I still have the die roll. So I'm going to go with that. We're going to see how it goes. Got ourselves a 5, that's an 11, that's extremely good. So it says, your bullheadedness pays off with a discovery. Roll a die and gain, we actually get to gain something here as it states down below. Let's go ahead and roll and see what we get. We got a 6, that is gonna be 1 hide. Well, I can't complain about that discovery card. We resolved it. I'm placing it in Whisper's inventory. That was a great one. So Whisper has 3 energy left, but I wanna get Ryu going in the opposite direction here. So we're gonna have Ryu head up north. With 4 energy currently, we're spending 2 to move into that unexplored hex to explore it and pull a discovery card. Drawing a card off the top of the deck, we have Roaring Falls. Now, some discovery cards are not going to work for the type of terrain and the features on them. So in this case, a good example, this hazard's about Roaring Falls. You look at the illustrations on the tile, there doesn't seem to be any water present. There's no river or ravine as depicted right here. It says resolve if you have a river or ravine, otherwise redraw. So this card will just go back and we pull a new discovery card to see if it matches up. This one says resolve if you are alone and your hex has a cave. We do not have a cave, so we're going to redraw. This will happen a couple times because we're trying to find a card that will actually tie into the current situation that we're in. So we're going to go to this next one. It says, Beasts of the Valley. Resolve the following. As you explore, you spot an imposing antlered creature, much longer than the others of its kind you've seen before. Its head turns to face you. We can actually test our conviction. And actually, it's pretty good because Ryu has the bonus in that category. Currently at a 3, but it's a 4 thanks to the bonus. And it says add +2 if you're indomitable, which I'm not. So I don't get that bonus off that character trait. But I'm going to go ahead and roll a die at 4. And we're going to see how we do here. All right, we got a 3, so that's going to be a 7. Oh, just shy of the best result. We got, in a terrified panic you flee. Move to a randomly selected adjacent hex and increase the activity by 1. That's not good. The activity dial has gone up to 2. We're going to go ahead and roll. If it's a 1 through 3, we go back to the starting tile. And it's a 4 through 6, we go down south with our friend here. We got a 1, so we're heading back to the starting tile. Now the current goal is to explore our surroundings, and it says this goal is completed after the 3rd hex is explored, which it currently is finally explored. So we go ahead and we're going to flip this over and see what it says. You found nourishment and shelter and awaken refresh. You're ready to face your goals for the next day. We're going to put the vital goal gather resources into play. To thrive in this new place, you'll need to acquire resources beyond just food and water. Fortunately, this valley has many materials available, but you'll have to work to get them. You can gain materials from foraging, mining, and even sometimes from fishing, which actually you've seen all 3 of those in action. This goal is completed when your characters as a group have 1 wood, 1 fiber, 1 sunstone, 1 cloudstone, and 1 riverstone. Now for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and assume we've gathered all these resources already. I already have a wood. I'm going to give myself a fiber. I'm going to give myself a sunstone. We have a cloudstone and we have a riverstone. So we're going to move on to the next set aside goal. And this is the reason why I wanted to jump ahead, because I want to talk about processing materials. In order to make more advanced tools, you'll have to figure out how to shape, cut, or break down the materials you find into more useful components or into rudimentary tools themselves. You can take the processing action to use any tool icons in your possession to flip material tokens with a corresponding icon. This goal is completed when the characters as a group have the following materials: 1 shaped cloudstone, 1 flacked riverstone, and 1 woven fiber. To process items from your inventory, you simply go ahead and spend 1 energy. And for example, if I had these 2 in my inventory, this icon in the top left-hand corner of this one tells us what we have available to use, an icon to use. We can then use that icon in order to flip, as it shows the same icon down here with an arrow, and you can flip it, basically banging these 2 together in order to process it into a better form than it was originally. There's also a reference card included in the game for processing to talk you through how it works, also how you're going to go ahead and gain all the available icons you have, because for the 1 energy that you spend, you're able to do a whole bunch of processing within your inventory. If you're able to do so, you'll also see that the flame resource can be used multiple times as well. So we'll move past that particular set aside goal and say we've processed a number of things. You see an example of how that can occur. We go on to the next set aside goal, which is the last one for this particular challenge. It's around making tools. It talks about crafting. You'll see the reference card there on the right and how it works. But I'm going to explain you using the one that I just processed. I've also brought a stick into the equation too. Now, the whole point of crafting is it allows you to take 2 different materials and combine them by spending energy. To start crafting, you place the 2 material tokens in front of you. You look at the art on these tokens. Does the orientation of the 2 tokens next to each other call to mind any possible items you might create by combining them? In other words, based on how they're situated. So what you want to focus on is how you would actually visually assemble these. So you're going to take a look at the illustrations and go, well, you're not going to place this beside a stick like this. And you can see it's not going to work right off the bat because the colors of the 2 that are touching right here, blue and yellow, they're not a match in either color or in shape. They have to be a match for both. So ones that are potential to connect would be something like this. I'm not sure what that could potentially create, but you're going to be moving them around trying to find pairings in the center of the same color and same shape. Those are going to provide you the best chance of finding something that could be connected and provide you some type of item. Now, once you've decided on whatever it is, so let's say in this case, I want to go like this, and I want to go like this, maybe actually like this. And I want to connect it across kind of more vertical on the yellow triangles. Then you're going to go ahead and you're going to create a number codex pattern from this essentially. So you're going to look at the very first color you have on the far left-hand side. So it's blue. Then you're going to count the number of icons across from left to right. So it's blue, 5, 4, 2, 2. So you simply head into the codex for the blue 5422, and it says, while this shape would create a spear, rounded cloudstone isn't a suitable tip. You'll need something sharper. Return the materials to your inventory. That was an example of crafting that did not go successfully. You don't lose the materials. They go back to your inventory as stated, but if you did happen to craft something, then the materials are of course lost and you gain an item instead. Now here's a pairing that actually worked out. Of course, if I want to continue trying to craft, I would have to spend an energy to do so, and doing that, I put together red 4222. Taking a look at the codex entry, that actually would create me a cloudstone mallet. It says you've made a cloudstone mallet. It can be used to strike and break materials and also used as a hammer to construct buildings and drive tent stakes. It can also be used as a weapon if necessary. Discard the materials used and gain the cloudstone mallet item card. Search the item deck face down for IT14. Record the recipe for this item in your tribe's journal. There is a journal included as part of the game where you can make notes of things that you've crafted and put together so you don't forget the combinations. So you'll simply go look for the IT14 card in this case from the item deck, which is quite large in the prototype, and I imagine it'll be that big, if not bigger, in the final version. These materials go back to the pool or the resource pool, not in my inventory, and this card is now mine. On each of your character mantle boards, you're going to have slots here for your hands. You have slots for inventory and for clothing, so you can take something like this, which is a bag item for processing. It can also be used as a weapon as well. It says when you fight using your might, you may reroll a die if the result of the reroll is a 4, 5, or 6, this item is destroyed. So it's worth mentioning, even though you can craft things, they're not going to last forever. And again, that's just part of the whole survival experience. You'll be able to use it for a given period of time. You'll have written down the recipe in your journal. So if you want to recreate it, you certainly can try to aim to do it if you find yourself a combination you really enjoy having. But again, all of these things are going to have durability to them that you're going to have to deal with as you continue to explore. So now you've seen all of the major things that you can do within the game. And of course, these really start to get fleshed out way beyond what you've seen in this video as you continue to play through the game. This is just scratching the surface of the combinations that you can come up with within the game, which is really cool. So going through this card here will tell us exactly some tips on going ahead and crafting items in the future. Tells us we go ahead and take a look at the back of this challenge card when we're done. If we've completed all of those different items, which we have, in this case, we go find Codex Entry 200. By finding vital resources, creating tools, and preparing to build a shelter, your people have created a solid foothold in the Vale. But rumors have begun to spread, a vast shadow in the night that swallows the moon, massive footprints in the gathering autumn frost, and strange howls from afar. You are not the valley's only new inhabitant, and discovering the behemoth that stalks the Vale alongside you might be key to your people's survival. It mentions here to add putting down roots to your looming challenges. At the end of any day phase, you can end the game. So you can stop right there if you wish. When you end the game this way, you illustrate the saga of the arrival on the primal cave wall, including the arrival mark. You add the arrival mark to the legend side of each of your character cards. So there is going to be, if I remember correctly, inside the game box, an area where you can literally draw specific things, which will be stated right here in the entries throughout different areas of gameplay, and you'll be drawing these, and they're likely tied right into the entire adventure altogether. So you'll want to follow all of these entries as you go through your adventures. It's going to open up the door to a whole world of things for you to check out and explore, and it's just really the beginning footsteps of your journey that you've seen in this video. As I alluded to just inside the narrative text that I read, behemoths are also a big time part of the game as well. You'll be running into these individuals throughout your adventures. They have their own lair, they have their own miniature, their own board specific to them, and of course instinct, reaction, and secret cards, which are actually just off to the side, and I'll show you a couple of those by flipping them over in a few moments. But they also come with learning secrets, which you can learn a secret from the behemoth. You can use those secrets. These behemoths actually have instincts themselves. They have their own habits, their own AI and movement. And there's contests that you can actually do, which are essentially tests against the behemoth itself. As an example, here is a look at a couple of instinct, reaction, and secret decks from the 2 behemoths included in the prototype. Here's a look at behemoth's instinct cards, reaction cards, and secret cards. So for instinct cards, they're basically an instruction manual for the behemoth's activation. You have reaction cards, which of course are going to sometimes throw tests at you and other things that you'll have to handle on the fly. And then you've got secret cards, because every behemoth has a secret of some kind that the characters can use to gain advantage of when dealing with it. It might even be a weapon that can harm it or a way to pacify the behemoth altogether. And each of these behemoths, of course, are going to behave very differently from each other, all using different instincts, reactions, and secrets. Now, this is something that I definitely don't want to glaze over, and that is investigation of omens. You always have your current omen. I've talked about this as we went through the video, but investigating omens is its own thing. You can keep your eyes open on game components. You can try to match with the current omen. You can try to determine a component ID. You can search for an omen in a table entry. You can read an omen in a table entry. There's a whole bunch of different ways to interact with omens beyond what you saw in this video. They're going to be used heavily throughout. So for instance, even with the foraging cards where you could see the illustration, there will be hidden symbols inside of some of those cards, even some of them on the hexes in different locations, things that tie more into the story and the narrative that'll have you going and referencing codexes to find out more information about the gameplay and the journey beyond. If you're paying attention to those types of things and you like to look for those little details, there's going to be those buried within the gameplay as you go through. Inside the prototype, there was also a journal. This was alluded to multiple times during this video. This is where you're going to track a number of things like your civilization name, any kind of notes that you want to have for recipes, your lore track. You can even depict the actual current layout of the area that you're in within a map in it. There's a number of things to keep track of in here for your own reference later on. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up this game overview and gameplay video for Stonesaga, which is hitting crowdfunding very, very soon. If you want to see the exact date as well as the link to the campaign, I've got it in the pinned comment and video description. Now, in terms of my own thoughts on this one, I really enjoyed the processing of materials, the gathering of materials, and the crafting system that was built around this one. For a survival game, those are some of the major meat components of what the design is wrapped around. If those things are clunky, the whole thing doesn't really hold up. A survival game needs to have the movement and the fiddliness of materials and crafting and all that stuff streamlined to a point where it's fun, engaging, and also simplistic to do and not overly onerous. And I think they nailed that. I really like this idea of potentially getting all these materials and then fine-tuning them by flipping them over quite quickly and then combining them the way they did in order to reference a codex. Like, all of it just makes a lot of logical sense. And then they went this step further by actually having the two different materials, when you place them side by side, logically actually tying together in a way that would make you think it's going to be a spear or a hammer, depending on what orientation of the materials you put side by side. All those kind of things were really good design choices. I'm really excited to see where this thing goes when it comes out in its final version. I hope the entire video helps you make an informed decision on whether or not Stonesaga is for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.